Realm of Reckoning is the brand new game from IV Studios, and we just had a chance to play it. Now, I love some of their back catalog. Moonrakers, Fractured Sky, we've had a ton of fun with these games. So this game will teach you today all about the mechanisms. We're going to speak to the designer to answer some of our more difficult questions. We'll look at the theme and the aesthetics, and we'll let you know if this is a game for you on Legendary Tactics. Rusky, we just finished a 3-player game of this. Can you give me a quick sense of what is this game?
Yeah, so this is a 3 to 5 player game. It is a little bit of a mix of a whole bunch of styles, I feel. Like there's area control features, there's bidding.
Right, so we have these different zones and you're trying to sort of influence the different tracks.
On the different influence tracks.
These little characters are the acolytes that you want to control the zones. Okay.
And you draft your cards to kind of build your own tableau.
That's right. So there's card tucking involved with which faction you want to be influencing, but you're also playing the card and then passing the cards that you don't play.
Right.
So lots of extra information that you can gather through the game.
Right, and then pick and choose and know what you're passing forward.
Now the scoring mechanism is a little bit different in this.
Right, so we place monuments throughout the game that will then influence the scoring that happens at the end of each of the 3 ages.
Good, so all these little circles on the board are places where different end game or in between each of the rounds that you score different points, and you get to decide actively each game what's going to score. So if you're doing particularly well at something, then you're gonna want that to score, and you're gonna be vying to win the cards that do that. We're lucky enough to have Austin here today from IV Studios to answer some of our questions. And the first one is, what are the design choice challenges that you have in making a game like this with a lot of complex mechanisms?
Yeah, so this game actually was in development for quite a while, and it probably was the closest to being done for the longest. We just couldn't get the last 10% of the game done. Basically, the first time we played the basically version 1, it was like, oh man, this is so close. This is really close to a done game. And 31 versions later, or something wild like that, it finally was done. And so I think just getting all the disparate parts to mesh into one thing was where we had the most design hiccups.
I'm also wondering, Austin, if there are any rules in particular that people have struggled with. For example, the wild cards, or the wild symbols, how those are applied, or are there any other complexities that you'd like to share with us now?
Yeah, every prototype has a rule that's not clear enough in the rulebook, right? And that just teaches us we got to go back to the rulebook to fix it. And this one, a bunch of different previewers and playtesters had problems with different rules. But I would say some of the ones that were repeating were people would, instead of using coins to pay for votes, 1, and then the next one costs 1 more coin, so 2 votes is 3 coins. Some people were just, 6 coins equals 6 votes instead of 3 votes. And so we were having to, make sure you're counting your coins, do that kind of thing. But beyond that, there were a few different questions that we got pretty repeatedly. The wild icons, why are they wild? Partially because some of them have 2 different versions they could be. So like open eyes, closed eyes for the blue one, for instance. But also we're future-proofing the iconography sets for those reckonings because we're expecting to do expansions. In fact, we're working on a community expansion right now that the community is developing where they can use those icons for other things. And so that's why they are disparate icons.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin. Now, I think we should talk about the aesthetics and the components here. Can you give us a little sense of what's the backstory that goes behind all of this?
Right. So the backstory, as I understand it, is this was an afterlife that was run by a queen, and it got completely shattered and tossed into ruin. And now there's these factions that used to be these pillars and are now warring for control of this afterlife.
That's right. So we as players are almost like hedging our bets. Who do we want to bid on in terms of influence, and where do we want to put our acolytes in order to shape the outcome of this civil war?
Right. Well, I'm building these monuments to maybe beef up a region and make that faction more powerful than another faction, perhaps.
That's right, absolutely. So for those of you who love chunky components, you've got these, a lot of block components, tons and tons. I mean, the board presence on this, the footprint is huge. It takes up a lot of, it's our entire table here, and that was only for a 3-player game. So
even more for 5.
Yeah.
You need a big table.
It's pretty massive. But what I find surprising about this is, at first, it feels like, wow, there is so much going on here visually. And I found as we started to get into the rules, it took us, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour to start to understand, oh, here's one faction, here's another, here's another. Each of these influence tracks are connected to their respective colors. And then around the board, you've got all these places for the monuments that amplify the scoring of those regions. So when you compartmentalize the board, I think it becomes a lot more clear. And because the colors are really muted on the board, it means that all these really bright factions pop.
They sure do.
So tell me, what are each of the different components here that we're looking at?
Right, so we have the monuments that I've already mentioned. We have the claim tokens, which we can move around and they can help control how you're going to influence the bidding, which is pretty cool. We have acolytes, which are actually look different for each of the different factions. And
we got the wardens.
The wardens.
This is like passive income in the game where when you're bidding, and one of the central mechanisms, these spinny wheels. I mean, any game that has some sort of hidden information where you're whizzing around trying to, okay, here's my bid. I love this little touch on it.
And there's so many ways to add points to your bid, depending on the layout of the board.
That's right.
Lots of flexibility.
Now, I have another question for Austin. So I'm wondering, Austin, if you can tell us about the manufacturing process that goes into this. Is this a game that can be made in America? Is it one that you need to bring in from another country? What are the complexities involved with producing a game like this?
So I think manufacturing a game, after designing it, is definitely the hardest part. It's something that doesn't come naturally to me. I had to learn a lot about it, and a lot of that was just to research on how other people were designing manufacturing games. And so I learned a lot from industry professionals that were able to give advice and that sort of thing. And one of the main pieces of advice I got early was some of the things can be made in America, but if you're doing a game that has plastic bits or custom dice, basically any component that's just not a standard component, there's not manufacturing in the United States that can make it. Most of the people that could do that level of manufacturing are working on military and medical grade stuff. And because of that, they're much more expensive. And so if you want to do custom things that, you can make the color of it how you want and the shape of it how you want, you have to go outside the United States. And for the longest time, that's been China. Obviously, that's starting to change with tariffs and stuff like that. A lot of companies are starting to open up Brazil factories and Thailand factories and all these different places. But the reason we can't make our games in the United States is the custom pieces would be so expensive. We would be charging $400 or $500 per game. And so I think the game companies and the type of games that can be made in America are paper heavy. They're like a lot of card games, or mostly, paper and that kind of component, very like standard dice, standard stuff like that.
So what games does this most remind you of?
Well, one of the ones that popped to my mind was Seven Wonders, with the passing of the deck that goes around with the most and least of different resources in terms of scoring.
That's right. And this would be a next level Seven Wonders.
Oh, for sure.
Now, the card text is actually pretty straightforward to understand. So you get the benefit in here. You move up on an influence track, and then late game in the scoring, this icon is part of your tucking engine. So little Wingspan tucking action there.
For sure.
Absolutely. Any other games?
Well, and the different ages, again, Wingspan comes to mind, Seven Wonders comes to mind as well with that.
So I also found this game reminded me a lot of War of Whispers, and that's a game where, just like this game, you don't play as a single faction, you influence whatever faction. So as the board evolves, you might actually shift your allegiances depending on which areas of the board are scoring. So that's pretty cool. Minor comparison to Quacks of Quedlinburg. One, when you score here, depending on what your neighbor's situation is, you may score better or worse. And also the idea of the catch-up mechanism.
Which I needed at one point.
Absolutely. And I think there's another IV Studios games that this is almost like adjacent to.
Yeah, Fractured Sky, we saw some similarities and different things with the secret bidding, and it's kind of like the Starfalls being very similar to some of the reckonings that can happen in the different
where you almost want to mobilize in a certain region.
People were drawn to different regions, different ages because of those events.
Absolutely. Right. And we also have, I think, the end game or the scoring mechanism where you trigger different ones. Arcs uses a similar mechanism to that. And finally, Through the Ages uses 3 different ages, and this game plays in a similar way. So there's a lot of similarities fleeting and passing to other games, and it just brings them together and sews them together really nicely. So let's go to Austin for a moment. I think one of the questions that everybody wants to ask a designer is what inspired the game? I understand you were one of the lead designers on this. So where did this come from?
Yeah, so this was kind of funny because it used a lot of the cutting room floor pieces from some past games. Brink had these reputation tracks, and Brink being in space and combined with the other elements of Brink made it feel too much like something like Dune Imperium.
Hmm.
And so we were like, we can't have reputation tracks in Brink because it makes it feel like this other game. But we fell in love with some of the ideas that we had for those reputation tracks. And so those reputation tracks, they came from the cutting room floor of Brink into this game. And then the card drafting game, I card drafting was the mechanic I actually hated. I did not like card drafting when I got into the hobby. I played Seven Wonders at a friend's house where everybody knew how to play Seven Wonders but me, and I thought I was just bad at card drafting. Then I played It's a Wonderful World. I loved that game, and it made me realize that I didn't like card drafting. I just don't like being bad at things, and so I probably would love Seven Wonders now. But and so when we got to card drafting and the reputation tracks, and then pulling some of the ideas that we'd had for Brink that were implemented a little differently. So in Brink you can buy these powers that are really expensive but can end up turning into points for you. The reputation tracks kind of mixed with that idea became the artifact for Realm of Reckoning. And so there are lots of pieces that are just little bits of ideas from lots of different games that have kind of like coalesced into Realm of Reckoning.
And Austin, who would you say this game is for?
So I think the person who it's not designed for is the person that sees a game and is immediately daunted and like I don't want to take the time to learn that because this game looks more complex than it is. I mean, at its core, you're picking a card, you're getting some resources on the card, and you're trying to invest in one thing that you're good at, and then figure out how you can get a monument to put on there. It's not actually all that complex, but there's a lot of moving parts. And so for the people that I think would love this game, they're medium gamer. They don't have to be a heavy gamer. They don't have to be playing for 6 hours on a weekend. They don't have to be, committed to reading 3 hours in the rule book. But they do need to want to play something that has some crunchy decisions. Like there are moments in Realm of Reckoning where, okay, I have this monument. I've just bid a lot and I've won this monument. Now I have to figure out how this is going to score me points and better points than anyone else is going to score. And so there are moments like that. And so I think this game is really for your medium gamer that wants to have that risk and payoff of investing in something versus reacting to something. I think resource management lovers would love this game, but also people that love playing games above the table. You're not just playing a Euro where you're trying to figure out the core economic way to make this work. You're trying to play against the people at the table as well. And I think what that kind of comes down to for me is there's people that play games again and again and again, and they want to figure out the exact way that they're going to play it in order to score points. And you can't do that in Realm of Reckoning. If you play Realm of Reckoning same way every time, you will not win most of those times because you have to react to what everyone around the table is doing.
So this game, I think, would appeal to a lot of different people. Number one, strategy gamers are going to love this. It's just so chock full of decision making.
Right.
Every single card, every single where am I going to tuck, you get to influence a lot on the board.
For sure. And I think there's so many different ways to win. No two games will be the same at all.
Right.
And
There's a lot of
I
variety.
want to try some different strategies, right? Like to play again and say, okay, I'm going to try this strategy, that strategy. But I think there's also cards that could come up for the different regions that have the rectings that could maybe blow up a strategy. So
That's right.
there's some balance to it that way for sure.
Yeah, I would say medium to heavier gamers this would appeal to. Maybe not so much for kids. I think it's better if you've played a wide range of games so that you understand those mechanisms at work right off the bat.
Yeah, we didn't find any of the mechanisms complicated because we'd been familiar with some of those prior.
Absolutely. And honestly, one of the best parts of the game to me is you're building up your resources, and all of the resources can be spent in an almost equal way. And then it's that bidding phase where you're just calculating. So if you're a mathy person and you love min-maxing and you really want to try to outmaneuver your opponents, and there's a bit of craftiness in the game, I think.
And what do you spend now versus hold back, and what are you bluffing with, and there's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah, you got that right.
So this game seems pretty complex, but it's actually quite streamlined, I think, and well balanced. So I think that's one of our questions for Austin is how do you design a game that has this complexity, but it's also so well streamlined?
Yeah, so I'm on a design team of three. So it's me, Zach Dixon, and Max Anderson. And, and I'm the person that's shoveling more into the game usually. I'm like, what if it had a rondel? What if it had this? And Zach and Max are the people cutting things out. Now, ironically, they're usually cutting out my rondels because I like rondels, and so I'll add them to any game. And obviously, most of our games, actually, we don't have a single rondel in any of our games. So apparently, I'm just putting them in for no reason. But the complexity is not something that you're going for. You're not going out to make a game like I just want to make a game as complex as possible. The complexity needs to have a payoff. And so that's all about chasing the fun, right? So whenever we're designing a game, when we get to the end of a playtest, we're like, what was fun about that playtest and how do we lean into that? And sometimes that makes it go less complex, and sometimes that makes it go more complex. And for Realm, it made it go more complex. Now, more complex being still a medium weight game. This is not, the campaign for North Africa, I think, is the most heaviest game on BGG or something like that. It's definitely not that level of a game, but it is more complex than Fractured Sky, for instance, one of our other games where you're mostly just bidding on regions. And I think that creating that kind of game, if you go out to just make a complex game, you can make a very complex game that's not very fun at all. And that's always the danger when making a complex game. And so chasing the fun and having that be the theme that you're always chasing, and is the complexity worth the payoff in fun, is the main way you have to approach designing.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about Realm of Reckoning today. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Now get out there.
Get gaming.
And be legendary.